Laken Riley, the Laken Riley Act. Now, Laken Riley was a Georgia woman who was murdered by an illegal immigrant, Jose Ibarra, last year. Sadly, Ibarra had been arrested in New York for riding a scooter without a helmet, and it was also arrested in Georgia for shoplifting. But both times, Ibarra was let go because these were such minor offences. And then he went on to murder Laken Riley. So the idea of the Laken Riley Act is to stop that happening. The first part of the Laken Riley Act says that if an undocumented migrant commits a reasonably serious crime, then the Act will force ICE to detain them if the police won't. And ICE will be forced to keep them there until they are deported. Now, the bill doesn't force the police to do anything, but ICE will have no choice. If the police aren't detaining them, then ICE have to. Once an alien who is inadmissible is arrested for committing a listed crime in the Act, ICE is obligated to not let them go free. And to be honest, I think the crimes, if they're reasonably serious, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with this concept. I think a lot of people would be fine with it. I mentioned on Planet America, according to a Fox poll, 59% of people said they would favour not just detaining, but deporting illegal immigrants who have been charged with crimes. But the devil is very much in the details. Let me go through the problems of the first part. There's a lot of them. Many more than I mentioned on Planet America. Affected crimes can be quite minor. Shoplifting, for instance, not a big deal. That's covered under the Act. And the crime doesn't even have to be committed in America. If ICE believe that someone shoplifted in Mexico before they came to America, then ICE is obligated to detain and deport them as well when they find out. The Act also applies to children. A 12-year-old kid who gets arrested for shoplifting is out of here. Oliver Twist, get yourself deported, mate. There is no room for you in America under the Laken Riley Act. Well, assuming he's an illegal immigrant from England, I guess, from Dickensian England. It's not just affecting migrants hiding in the shadows either. The bill includes migrants who cross the border on their own but have since been granted asylum. So they qualified for asylum, but if they were caught shoplifting, they then get detained and deported. The worst bit, though, by a mile, is this. Only an arrest is required. Not a charge. Definitely not conviction is required. So if the police make a mistake, you still get detained and deported under this law. Even if the police drop the charges, it doesn't matter. You're going to get detained and deported if you get arrested under this bill. And by the way, being detained might get in the way of you showing up to court for your trial. Or it might get in the way of you preparing a proper defense, stopping you from clearing your name. Even worse, you could be deported before you even have your trial to clear your name. That's particularly dystopian. You get arrested, you're an innocent person, you get deported before you get a chance to prove you're innocent. And even if you did prove you're innocent, you're getting deported anyway. And this, by the way, this whole arrest thing makes the Laken Riley Act a perfect vehicle for blackmail. I'll quote Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. He's a senior fellow at the American Immigration Council. He said, this could be used by unscrupulous employers or abusive husbands and spouses to threaten people, threatening to report them for a theft, and in the hopes that they would then be arrested, and then ICE would be required to prioritize taking that person into custody, and then that person will be ineligible for release on immigration bond. Absolutely spot on. Of course, detaining and deporting everyone who commits a minor crime is going to cost a lot of money, because that's going to be a lot of detaining and deporting. ICE estimate it will cost $83 billion over the next 3 years for 118,000 additional detention beds, 40,000 more personnel, and a 25% increase in deportation flights, which would be required. The only problem is the Act contains no extra funding at all. So that's a massive fail, and it's not going to work. Also, there's opportunity cost, because unless you can't detain and unless you can detain and deport absolutely everybody, I promise you that will not happen, especially with no funding. Every person you detain and deport is taking the place of someone else. Someone who might be a higher value deportee. When you're detaining and deporting Oliver Twist, you're not detaining and deporting someone who might have committed a real crime. That's why the Obama administration, which deported a hell of a lot more people than Trump did, by the way, focused on deporting the least desirable people first. But the Laken Riley Act throws all of that out the window. That's the first part. Then there's the second part, which allows state attorneys general to sue the federal government when they think the government isn't being tough enough on immigration law enforcement. That's right. The state has standing to sue the federal government for individual detention decisions, for liberal policies or programs. If they don't like a parole program, they can sue the federal government about it. They can also sue to force visa bans on specific countries that aren't accepting deportees. Say Venezuela doesn't accept any deportees. A state attorney general can sue the federal government to force a visa ban on Venezuela. All you need to be able to do to qualify for one of these lawsuits to sue the federal government is show $100 of damage to the state. Not a high bar. Remember, immigration enforcement's meant to be the discretion of the federal government. But this bill flips that on its head. As long as the federal government isn't tough enough for your liking, of course, in the cases where the states think that the federal government's been too tough, if they want to sue it to make it more liberal, you can't do that. Sorry, you can't do that. Only to make them more tough. Just think what a state like Texas that loves right-wing lawfare, think about what they would do with this power. They could swamp the courts with this crap. By the way, Steve Bannon has openly said he's going to try to use this provision to hound India so they can get a visa ban against India to shut down the H-1B visa program, which he hates so much. So even MAGA people are looking to exploit this bill. You might be wondering, by the way, what this second part has to do with Laken Riley's death, because it's in the Laken Riley Act. The answer is absolutely nothing. But the Democrats are so pathetically cowed by the election results at the moment. They're bending over backwards to show that they're tough on immigration. So they're waving this piece of shit through. In the House, 48 of the 215 Democrats voted for it. In the Senate, 12 Democrats voted for it, so it can't be filibustered. Ruben Gallego and John Fetterman co-sponsored this bill. The only amendments to this bill in the Senate were to add more crimes to the list. So the bill's going to happen. It's passed in the Senate. It's going to go back to the House again and be passed again. And then Trump will obviously sign it. I suspect in the end, ICE's upcoming funding shortages are going to compromise this bill's impact, but I predict it's going to be a massive pain in the ass for ICE. This is a terrible bill. And remember, I'm big on immigration enforcement. I'm really, really pro-immigrant, and I really strongly think legal immigration should be very high in America. But I want to stop illegal immigration. I want it to be orderly and reasonable and not chaotic. So I support things that are going to discourage illegal immigration, but this is just ridiculous. This is terribly written, but it's going to happen.